incident has been predictably portrayed as a one-off, an anomaly that slipped through the net of measures implemented to defend the rights of the workers supplying these clothing giants. Appalled by these reports, which are paramount to slavery, I felt compelled to investigate further during my travels across Asia. I hoped to speak to workers and officials to hear their side of the story, and to gain entry into a factory to film the conditions for everyone to see. The conditions of the garment industry in Bangladesh are in general amongst the worst in the world. Despite a hike in the minimum wage in 2010, workers' wages start at 3,000 taka a month, just $36. This wage falls significantly short of an acceptable living wage that is enough to provide basic necessities such as food, clean water, accommodation, health and education. Trade unionists calculate a living wage to be at least 5,000 taka, yet even this total would hardly liberate these workers, who, for the most, live in tiny dilapidated structures in Dhaka's sprawling slums. Lovecraft Garments is a factory that has recently supplied Gap and Nygaard. We arranged to meet with several Lovecraft workers at their home. They gave us an insight into the conditions in which they are forced to live, and revealed that the factory is breaking several labour laws.
Which garment factory do they? Lovecraft Garments, okay. How many people live in this room? 10. And how many hours do they work in a normal week?
10 hours.
So when they do overtime, they work
13 to 12 hours.
12 to 13 hours, okay. And do they choose to do overtime or do
It's a rule. If they have overtime, you need to work overtime.
yeah, if they say they have to work overtime, then they need to work overtime.
Bangladeshi labour law states that a working day should be no longer than 8 hours, with an optional 2 hours of paid overtime.
How much they get paid a month?
4,000.
4,000 taka.
On this wage of $50, the workers cannot provide for themselves, and therefore lodge with their uncle. Their family of 10 can afford one small room in which to cook, sleep and live, taking turns in the single bed. A street of a dozen such families share one toilet and water supply. The workers were confused when we asked about holiday entitlements. Apparently they're offered compensation for not taking any time off work. Although this extra income is appreciated by the impoverished workers, the practice is illegal and leads to exhaustion. The factory offers half the legal requirement of maternity leave, just 8 weeks. The workers are therefore forced to work gruelling hours at the latter stages of pregnancy, endangering the health of both mother and child. The factory also provides no childcare, despite the fact that it is a legal requirement.
And at Love Garments, is there childcare? No, there's no childcare.
As childcare or schooling represents another crippling expense, many workers are forced either to send their children to stay with family in rural areas or let them grow up on the streets. Attempts by workers in the industry to improve their working conditions are met with suppression. Factory workers routinely hire goons to intimidate workers and break up unions, denying workers freedom of association. We met with a spokesperson from the National Garment Workers Federation, who divulged that as a worker she was threatened daily by a group of men with rape and violence if she did not drop the case she had raised against the factory.
The factory owners, they do threaten the workers. They hire goons, the local goons of areas, and they tell them to beat them up, beat the workers up, anything that is going to lead them to keep their mouths shut about anything else. All these sort of things. There was this male worker. He was beaten up very severely and thrown into the drain, into the sewer. And then the union leaders, they helped them out, helped the person out. When she was a worker herself in the factory, she had been threatened by the goons of the factory owners, and whenever she used to go to work, she used to find the goons staying there day after day, waiting for her, and they used to say that they're going to pick her up and then probably rape her any day if she doesn't withdraw the case that she filed against in the court.
Multinational buyers are responsible for these atrocious standards.
A key player of this business, they are the multinational company. And you see, the main profit from this business, it is actually going to the pocket of the multinational company. This multinational company, they are talking and they are putting pressure to the local factory owners that you have to ensure that you are providing the living wage of the workers. You have to ensure that the workers, they are working in the better condition. But on the other hand, this multinational company, they are putting pressure towards the local business people that you have to reduce your price.
Factory owners consequently make few improvements in order to maintain profitability. Various gestures are made in pretense of working standards, but often to little effect. For example, although legislation now demands that factories provide childcare, the low standards of this service, even where it is enforced, means that the majority of mothers prefer for their children to play in the slums. We asked a local man where these children's mothers were.
He said they're working.
Working, but he don't know who's working.
But they're working in the garment factories.
Some other factory.
To see for ourselves the conditions within the workplace, we visited Southern Designers, a supposedly reputable factory that supplies Nygaard and employs over 1,000 women. Talking at length with one of the managers, I was shocked by the way he viewed the workers as a commodity, simply an asset to be used for their own means.
Here, basically, the people are very hard-working people. Yeah. You tell anything, they'll do it for you. So they are raw people. Okay, you can mold them as much as what you can. This is the best part of these guys. Yeah. So you can use them. Yeah. However you can.
Yeah. So how much, roughly a month, how much average work?
Maybe $60 to $70. So obviously, whatever we give, they're happy with that. They don't know what exactly they're worth. You have plenty of people over here. Plenty. The labors are very cheap.
Whilst the company are expected to provide childcare, I witnessed just one plain room, with one supervisor and only a handful of children.
So there's like 1,000 workers, 10 children?
Yeah.
The NGWF campaign that only through a fair price, offered by multinational buyers, can workers achieve a fair wage and the rights that go with it.
So let's say, so these sell for, Nygaard sell these for $37. Yeah. How much do you get for this jumper?
If you buy from stock, they're very cheap.
Very cheap. Like how much?
Many of the issues in Bangladesh are shared by the Cambodian garment industry. The minimum wage is higher at $61 per month. However, the cost of living is also higher, and the total is not considered to be adequate in providing the basic needs of workers.
The actual minimum wage at the moment is $61 US. It's too much low, and the worker cannot live with the minimum wage. Because of low wage, worker has to live collectively. So they rent a room small like this, and they stay with 3 or 4 or 5 people, and sometimes without window, even sometimes without fans, because they cannot afford with their utility expenses if they use the fan. So that's the minimum, the current minimum wage cannot allow them to live in the decent living standard as required by the labor law at the moment. So they have to work long hours and then eat less. That's why in the late 2010 and early 2011, thousands of workers fainted in some factories in Cambodia.
Walking around the slum areas, we were able to interview workers who admitted that they could not consider starting a family, as they could only just support themselves.
Because I want to have a good family and get the husband, but you cannot imagine because work every month, not have the money enough, just enough for a month.
This lady told us that she could not afford to accommodate and educate her children in the capital where she works, and they therefore live many miles from her with their relations.
5 people live there. My children, they live at the province, but now vacation, so they also come to live there.
Oh, I see. So she doesn't live with her children?
No, they live there. They cannot study.
They can't study here?
Yeah.
River Rich Garments is a notorious company and currently supplies both Walmart and Nygaard. In 2007, the dismissal of union founders led to a mass strike, demanding just working conditions and freedom of association. An agreement was eventually reached. Nevertheless, according to a study by the Community Legal Education Centre, the company are once again violating various labour laws on human rights. We tried to gain entry to the factory, but after a lengthy time with security, we were only permitted to walk around the factory buildings. Later though, we talked to workers who reported that around 10% of the workforce are juveniles. However, this is hard to prove as the factory reportedly forges documents as proof of age. Workers are forced to work between 10 and 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. The workers are rarely allowed holidays. Similarly, although workers are entitled to 18 days annual leave, they're only granted this leave in special circumstances. Although workers are entitled to paid sick leave to a maximum of 2 days, the factory insists that they provide a sick note from a designated hospital. As workers cannot afford the fees necessary to procure this document, they must either go unpaid or return to work before they've recovered. The factory does not offer any maternity leave. Cambodian law demands that factories provide 90 days maternity leave at 50% pay. Workers instead are expected to take a couple of unpaid days to recuperate before beginning work again under a new probationary contract. Another major problem in Cambodia is the use of short-term contracts.
Company now they use short-term contract is the tool for destroy worker, for violent worker, and for again the union. They use the short-term contract.
Under the short-term contract, 3-month contract, 6-month contract, if the worker, any worker rejects overtime 1 or 2 times, their employment contract would not be renewed at the expiry date.
This ploy is also used to rid the factory of members of the unions and pregnant workers.
And the short-term contract does not allow them to join trade union freely. If you join trade union, the employer just sometimes kick you out immediately. So as soon as the employer know the worker got pregnancy, sometimes the worker got dismissed immediately. My niece-in-law was one of the victims. She got pregnant 3 months pregnant, and then her employer dismissed her immediately when they know she got pregnant, without any compensation, without any money.
Nan Quang Garments produce clothing for Nygaard and Reebok amongst others. On the 4th of August 2011, 500 workers at the factory went on strike in protest to the company's ill treatment of its employees. The factory employs underage girls, a claim substantiated by the admission of a 15-year-old worker we met outside the factory.
She's 15 years old.
She's 15 years old, and she works in the factory?
Yeah.
Okay.
She pay per month $30.
Pay per month $30?
Yeah.
Can we see her identity card on the camera? Can we see your card?
They illegally take these girls on in exchange for cheaper labour costs. The grateful teenagers forgo their transport allowance, work long hours of overtime and accept a pitiful wage. The factory reportedly forces workers to do overtime, typically demanding between 10 and 12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Normally he works for 1 day, he works 8 hours, but normally she overtime until 4 hours more.
4 more hours. So she works 12 hours a day.
12 hours.
The factory does not provide any paid sick leave. They demand that sick workers continue to come to work. This obviously hinders the recovery of the afflicted worker and encourages the spread of disease. The factory reportedly discriminates against pregnant workers. It recently dismissed 2 women for becoming pregnant to avoid paying for their maternity leave. These women now have no source of income with which to support themselves through pregnancy and to provide for their children.
The woman for the pregnant, regarding the law is you work in the company for one year, you have a right to maternity leave. And you can get 50% of the salary. So the company, they don't want to pass 1 year because they don't want to give this amount. So the company, they can get benefit from that.
This grave injustice represents more than a breach in labour law. It's a gross violation of the human rights of both the mother and the unborn children. As in Bangladesh, responsibility for these violations must lie partially with the multinational buyers. With their insistence, poor practices such as short-duration contracts could be prevented. With more conscientious pricing, they could fund better working conditions and a higher minimum wage.
If you want to export to EU to UK, you must have the certificate to the license from the Ministry of Commerce. Now the big company, they around more than 300 companies are registered and they have right to export to the other. And also this one, sourcing from the big buyer like H&M, Nike, Gap, Adidas, Nike. In the same time, company try to use subcontractor. 100% of subcontractor use short-term contract, a tool for discrimination against union and also to violent worker to get the benefit one. But in general, they don't care. If they don't have complaint, they don't care. They don't do what they can.
It was clear to me by the end of my trip that the multinational buyers are the root cause of the problems highlighted. Child labour, unfair wages, forced overtime and discrimination, as well as the refusal of basic entitlements such as annual leave, sick leave, maternity benefits, and the right to unionise, are all violations of the workers' human rights. The multinational buyers must take responsibility for the poor conditions found within their suppliers' factories, and take steps to enforce the labour laws with both suppliers and their subcontractors. These violations are not anomalies. They're the product of an industry that seeks to minimise costs while ignoring human rights and the labour laws intended to uphold them. I do not know what difference my findings will make, but I pray that together we can put pressure on the clothing giants to implement changes and improve the lives of people trapped in poverty within the garment industry.